Juan, you have launched the recording, right?
Yes.
Okay. So hi everyone, thanks to joining the first real world asset onboarding meeting. So we will go through the following agenda. We will review 3 posts on the forum. First, the centrifuge model pool that was at 70% agreed on. Then we will discuss the DAI hedging issue that we can have with real world assets, and discuss that a bit more because the pool wasn't so much voted on. And lastly, we will discuss the legal structures of MakerDAO. It's a post on how we can have some legal entities which can be used, probably not for the near term, but in the medium, long term for real world assets. Okay, now you can see my screen. So before to start the first post, I want to highlight that there is a lot of MIPS that will go through the governance session in October, at least 4, I think. So please, at the end, you will be able to vote for those MIPS. I will not cover them in this agenda, but if you have questions on them, Matthew is here, and I assume people from Centrifuge are here as well. So the first item is the centrifuge model. So what we have done is to look all the information we have on console freight and the centrifuge model more broadly, and do another synthetic view on how it should work, and look more in detail on some details of the process to see if there is some disagreement or some complexities along the way. So I released the post 6 days ago with the naive infographics that detail some inner workings of the model. And the pool so far was was great, with 70% of the people agreeing on this model. Some have abstained. If some of those people are here, you can maybe explain if there was a reason to abstain. I put, and one person was unsure. So if you have more questions to get a better understanding of the model, now will be the time to ask. Yeah, maybe I will not go through the post, but if there is some question on this model, please just ask. Okay, I can expect there is no question, but we can come back later on this topic. So the second point, which is a bit more complex, or at least not that easy, is the issue we can have with DAI. So as we all know, DAI is not currently at $1, and it's not that much an issue. Well, it was an issue when it was at $105, $104 or USDC in the crypto world, but in the real world, if you make a loan for one project over the course of, let's say, 3 months, and you are buying your DAI at $1 and you should repay them at $1.01, that means it's more expensive 1% over 1 year. And so if you make a loan at, let's say, 2% for 3 months, if DAI is going from $1 to $1.01, it's like not having a 2% interest rate, but a 6% interest rate. And that's quite an issue if we are making a loan in the real world, because people are not farming sushi or other tokens in the real world. They are making buildings. So they have some ROI that can expect, but it's not like yield farming. So this is why we have to find a solution for that. Currently, the solution we have proposed in this post was to say, for instance, to see what is the cost to hedge the DAI USD exchange rate at an OTC desk. If we have a quote, we can then factor the difference in the lending rate that we will do to the borrower. So at some way, we can say that we will subsidize the issue of having DAI that is not $1 and paying it ourselves, which makes sense as for real world assets. We're dealing with people that want a loan in USD, not in DAI, and the competitor will make them a loan in USD and not in DAI. So the result was less agreed upon. So it's a bit mixed between the yes and the no, with again a lot of abstention and one unsure. So this will be an issue if we cannot find a way. So I don't know if some people have any question on this topic.
Yeah, I have one. Do we know how big are these markets on hedging DAI price? Which OTC desks are providing these offers?
No, I have no idea. But we were discussing it with Centrifuge.
I can answer.
Oh yeah, please.
I mean, we have in the past only worked with SCP, but we can also get other competing offers. They generally have pretty good DAI prices and a tight spread. So that's who we've worked with, and that's so those like percentage ranges, like sort of somewhere in the range between like 20 to 50 basis points on each transaction, sort of doing this hedge, and so doing it both depending on the volatility. But of course, like that has like greatly varied in the recent months. And obviously this is like and the reason we've been sort of proposing that that Maker sort of definitely does undercut the like sort of minimum cost of capital a bit, and sort of provides this, factors it in, is not that we think that this always will have to be the case, but just obviously until we've sort of solved the DAI stability, it's a significant cost to asset originators to do these loans in DAI versus USDC. And so like if you were to like, regardless of Maker, start originating these loans, you would actually use USDC. And that's sort of the place where this is coming from.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, basically I was just wondering if, you know, I've heard there were some options to hedge against it, but I didn't know what notional values were actually considered. Like, would the company that you mentioned, would they really be able to, you know, hedge against 10 million notional or even more?
Oh yeah. I mean, they're a very large OTC desk that is able to, like, for the volumes we're talking about here, they're able to do that.
Okay, nice, thanks. And
so the price is 25 basis points, you said, but on what time horizon?
No, so I mean, it depends. Like historically, this was like somewhere between 25 to like 60 basis points per transaction. I mean, we've been doing this over the last year with different asset originators for different maturity dates and like different lengths, and so it always depends a bit. And then it depends on the DAI price, right? Like when it's at 105, then the hedge is much more expensive than when it's at 101. Yeah.
Yeah, but we can, currently it's at 101, and we can expect that real world assets, it will go down to 100.
Of course, you can expect
that's a
it.
net gain for the originator.
I mean, but so look, the perspective, right, you have to think about is this is like this asset originator is giving $100,000 to a business, and 60 days later they're getting $100,000 plus interest, so maybe like $500 in interest back. If then like the DAI price in that time like goes up by like 0.5%, then that's the entire profit, like that's the entire interest rate due in the period that will go towards it, meaning like this is actually a loss for everyone involved, right? So like, and in the last 6 months, like DAI has had like variability within like 2 months of easily 3 to 4%. And so like, and you can't pick the time, right? Like when this loan is due, you're like gonna settle like today or tomorrow, because otherwise you start accruing interest, you're overdue, and then you have to explain that. So like, there's not a lot of flexibility in like just waiting for like less DAI to pay back. And so like, that's why almost always we've sort of decided to hedge the exchange rate risk.
Yeah, so from my point of view, it makes sense that maker should be penalized because we are not able to keep the peg. But as we are all here, we know that going forward, the peg will be solved. So obviously it's a bit odd to pay for something that we are sure will be solved in the future. So I have started to thought about how can we make the hedge ourselves, because we know it's a winning bet, but I haven't found a way for maker to do that. So maybe if someone is smarter than me, maybe you can find the solution. But that will be the best solution, I think. But I don't know how to do it. Akiva is saying something.
I mean, yeah, I think that's a different. Well, Akiva's proposal of lowering the collateralization ratio on stablecoins, I don't think that just because, I mean, it would probably result in that, but there's other problems with that I think are not worth. I mean, yeah, we're opening up a whole can of worms here if we start talking about lowering the collateralization ratio.
Yeah, Akiva is suggesting to do it just one day when you repay, I think. Yeah, but
yeah, that would require a governance vote, and yeah,
taking 1 billion USDC is probably not safe.
Yeah.
No, that wouldn't work probably. But I'm thinking, you know, what's the difference here with, you know, considering Maker and other financiers is that Maker doesn't really. Is there a plan to offer like a scheduled repayment? You know, from Maker side, or are we approaching this the same way we're doing with other world types, right? Because the biggest advantage from borrower side, if you borrow from Maker, is that the repayment schedule is pretty flexible, right?
Yeah.
But I guess we're going to have, you know, something in place where we say, you know, this is the duration of this kind of loans, but in case we, you know, we're not really strict about it, the volatility doesn't really, you know, is not really a problem anymore, or by lesser amount, right?
Yeah, I understand your point, but I think it's a problem for the originator. So it's kind of a no limit loan that we are suggesting here, at least for Centrifuge, and I think every real world asset. But the issue is we are giving the money, lending the money to SPV vehicles that will lend the money back to in the real world. The issue is if they have no loan, but there is an interest, they will lose money.
Yeah, so you have this risk, right, Primož, that So the SPV gets 100,000 DAI, gives it to the borrower in dollars. Borrower pays interest, and therefore the SPV is able to pay maker interest. 30 days later, the borrower pays back. Now the borrower obviously stops paying interest, but if the DAI price now is 1%, like 100 basis points higher than what it was when you sold it, now obviously you would have this loss. But you can't wait for the DAI price to go down either, because like there's still this debt that's accruing interest in maker. And so you have to, you don't have a lot of flexibility in just saying, oh, I'm gonna sort of wait on the DAI price, because then you're paying that interest that the SPV is not getting paid interest on.
I totally get, I totally get this part, but what's the relationship between maker and SPV? Because SPV actually makes the conversion from DAI to dollars.
Oh, I mean, I agree. Like this is not a risk to maker. I'm just saying like these SPVs are like, so these asset originators are like obviously working with maker because they're hoping to get a source of capital that is attractive to them. But there's also a cost to doing that, right? And this cost is like the exchange risk today. And I mean, maker could say, it's a thing for maker to say, okay, we want to actually subsidize real world assets to be settled and traded in DAI, because that's a good thing for maker, right? Like you want, I mean, and I'm super bullish on DAI. I want everything to be used. Like the more we use DAI for all these things, the better, right? And therefore, like, I obviously want to like make this like pain for asset originators to settle these loans in DAI cheaper by saying, well, actually, like, look, like maker's gonna subsidize this at least to some part by offering a lower stability fee, which is something that maker can totally do as long as DAI is above the peg. And when it's below, then it's not going to be a problem anymore. And then we've solved sort of both problems, right? And so for me, it's kind of a win-win to say you asset originators should get a lower cost of capital if they're doing these loans in DAI as opposed to USDC, for example, or any other sort of like fiat-backed.
No, I totally get this point. I was just thinking, you know, what about if maker is more flexible on the repayment timelines and say, you know, you can return the loan when the DAI price is more in favor of the, you know, repair, so they don't carry this additional cost of DAI volatility or higher DAI price. Because from maker side, we don't really have, you know, a cost of capital or something. We're not limited by depositors who would, you know, want their money back. Yeah. So maker is the biggest advantage from maker is that we can be pretty flexible on repayment schedules, right? That's why I thought maybe we could be, you know what I mean.
I mean, if we would structure this as like a... Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, you mean removing the interest rate?
No, not removing. It's just when you need to make the actual repayment of DAI to make a vault, it doesn't need to be, you know, specifically on some date, but it's kind of depends on DAI price when it's more favorable, right?
But I mean, so then we have that problem, right? That's like you need to, you're still paying interest while you're waiting, and so that's not something that you can afford to do if no one is paying for that interest.
Oh, so yeah, I basically thought you could recycle that capital into another loan.
I mean, of course, yeah, and in the majority of cases, you will do that. You will recycle it, and so like you won't turn over the entire portfolio every sort of on loan maturity, right? It's only the difference, and so like you have to model out exactly how much it costs. But like for everyone else, right, like sort of involved in this, like investing in this portfolio for the asset originators, like there's always a risk when the portfolio grows or shrinks that there is this exchange risk. I think, I mean, it's maybe a bit, this like whole conversation is like, I think maybe trying to like very tightly link these two things together, which is probably like maybe a way to look about it, but look at it. But I think in the end is like, well, does maker want to subsidize the cost of capital to use maker because they have a need for as collateral, or does maker say they're going to charge the highest rate they can, which would be the yield on the drop interest rate, not giving any sort of like not giving any discount. And I think from makers' perspective, actually like offering less than what the yield is on these assets is very much in their interest, because maker wants to have the most, like maker right now at least, right, wants to have the most DAI generated possible. And so like you actually want to kind of like give a lower rate, because otherwise if the asset originator can pay the same interest to other investors that are willing to do it in USDC and get like this whole exchange risk out of the picture, then you're now like you haven't achieved some, from makers' perspective, right? You haven't achieved much. From the asset originator side, they obviously don't care whether it's USDC or I'm overly generalizing, but of course, like for them in the end, if there's this huge risk on DAI, there needs to be, I think, a bit of a benefit to doing that, and so that's where this is coming from.
Have we thought about on the opposite side, if DAI was below the peg? I know that it's history now and it hasn't happened for a while, because in this case, in effect, actually the asset originator will be on actually making an extra profit, right?
Yeah,
and
we
if
can
we
expect
were
it
to
will be the case.
Yeah, so we would be subsidizing potentially something that I know that it's unlikely. We haven't been there for a while.
Guaranteed to happen again. I mean, if a end lender has a bunch of capital sitting outside, the minute it goes below 1, they're a natural liquidity provider and they'll want to repay their loan. The real issue, though, is if off-chain lenders continue to pull down more and more DAI when the price is below 1, maker, as almost like a defensive mechanism, should either A, increase their cost of capital, which, well, I would dispute that, but really the next mechanism is just to constrain the amount of lending by lowering debt ceilings to inhibit lenders from flooding the market with more DAI when it's below 1. But the real solution is to have enough off-chain lenders such that whenever one party looks at it as being too low, somebody else looks at it as a mechanism to repay their loan. When you look at it in a micro perspective of just one individual lendco, that issue becomes prevalent. When you have a portfolio of off-chain lenders, they'll ultimately feed off of each other, and that's where we're trying to get to.
I agree with you, Matthew. At the end of the day, I think that it's a similar situation when you're using FX or a different currency from yours. But in this case, the difference in volatility is much less. So you either hedge it and someone has to take the risk, and that hedge will have a cost, or we kind of not hope, but you don't hedge it, and then the difference will have an impact. And I think it was Will that mentioned the peg being on the 0.99 instead of the 101. And in this case, you would kind of lose money when doing the initial conversion. But yeah, so basically there will be a delta if when you have to repay, the rate is different from when you withdrew the money. So I think that's the real risk. It's about the movement and not about being over or under.
Yeah, exactly. If the rate is the same at the beginning and at the end, it's not important, it's not relevant, but it's a variation of the rates that can be either a benefit or an expense.
Yeah, and also I think that we should consider I'm not entirely sure what maybe Matthew or Lucas can help us a little bit more, but I'm not sure what the margins are, right? Because eventually someone could take the bite and say, yeah, we are more competitive and there's this risk, or you can guarantee the lender, hey, the risk, there's no risk, fluctuation risk, we'll take the bite if that happens, but we're going to be less competitive, so you kind of offload the price on them.
Yeah. But either you pay for the protection or you take the risk, or someone need to take the risk.
Yes.
and we can expect it is almost the same as paying for protection.
Yeah, I mean, when you buy even when you buy like any product online on e-commerce, and if you do the calculations with FX, you're probably better off buying on usually US dollars compared to euros, for example. So what they're doing is when they price in euros, they tell you, hey, you can pay in your own currency. This is a feature for you, but we'll charge you 2% more. How much do you care about that 2%? I guess that in this case, it will matter a lot more than when you're buying, because I imagine that the margins are not huge. But again, this is something that we can consider.
Yes.
Yeah, Lucas, maybe a question for you more. How is actually usually the contract with those OTC desks in terms of like the hedging? Is it like for the whole maturity of the loan, or how is usually actually structured actually the contract, the legal agreement with them?
Like, I mean, this is like sometimes the asset originators have bought forwards. Sometimes one of the other things we're looking at is if an OTC desk would sort of just give like a fixed price in and out, and then just factor that in on their end. I mean, like it's a bit of a, I think my opinion, we're getting like a bit too hung up on like, okay, how much is this cost, and like should we subsidize like the use of DAI in these assets by that amount? I think the question I would be asking is like, is it worth it for Maker to outbid what, for example, retail investors would be willing to expect as yield? Because obviously the Maker has today zero cost of capital, there's no DSR, and there's a huge pressure on Maker actually to mint more DAI. So I think like the question I'm asking is like for example, right, like these are additional costs, like there's sort of stuff involved in getting these asset originators to actually start working with Maker. And so just being able to offer an interest rate or a stability fee that is lower than the yield of these assets actually makes sense from Maker's perspective. And that's I think the question to the community.
And at the end, you come to the community with a proposition for the drop, and the community can accept or not. I mean, it's a deal. If you can have a better price with another kind of drop in USDC, well, that's the market. So you are a competitor. So for instance, you can ask for a drop in a DAI with 6%, and maybe you can offer 7% in USDC.
Yeah.
And after that, it's up to the community to decide. One thing is sure, we cannot provide USDC.
Exactly. Yeah.
We will have either to take the 6% or say no.
No, right. There's no reason why Maker just wouldn't say, yeah, we're like willing to pay 5%, and the asset originator can take the 1% spread.
Yeah.
It
depends on the risk assessment. I mean, if the risk premium is lower than the 5%,
exactly,
don't really care.
Yeah.
If the risk premium is 7%, probably it's not safe to make a 5%
investment at all, right? And then it should be liquidated. Yeah. So what we're talking about is like, and that's I think the right. Even if these assets are yielding say 7%, this is the example we used, then like as long as the risk assessment is that actually it's safe to charge a 5% stability fee. Should Maker say we want 7% just because that's the maximum we can get out, or will Maker say as long as DAI supply is fine, we'll actually as long as the DAI supply is an issue, we'll like sort of offer the lowest cost possible.
I want to jump in.
Yeah, Kiva.
I think on this whole topic of like Maker charging the most it can before people leave, or should they just charge like what the risk is? The important thing is that you can't charge the most possible when DSR is at 0, because then the second DSR starts moving up, people are going to get pushed out. You also have to factor in the cost of hedging DSR. So when Maker is charging the highest cost possible that the borrowers will tolerate, that should be the cost of the risk premium, and the cost of DSR, and the cost of hedging DSR.
Yeah, correct. It's true that currently the DSR is at 0%, but that can change. And then it will be a risk for Maker. There can be a world where we are paying more for DSR than for the interest we get from real world assets. And then we are making a loss. But that's an issue we already have with stable coins, so we will have to solve it anyway. I would say it's an issue, but we don't have a solution currently. Okay, if no one has a question on DAI exchange, maybe we can move to the next topic.
Just one last comment.
Yeah.
I want to say that maybe this is a problem akin to getting a loan on a fixed interest rate versus variable interest rate. So when it's variable, it's cheaper, but it might go one way or the other. And when it's fixed, you fix it for a price, and of course it's more expensive. So I think that's slightly equivalent. I don't know how it would work from the commercial point of view. So maybe Matthew or Lucas can weigh in there. But yeah, that's my view.
So for Matthew, it's a variable interest rate, but the variability is from the real world.
Yeah.
So it's not the variable interest rate that we can have in the crypto world. And this is an important point, and that's why I asked for the ability for the governance to be able to liquidate, maybe even if it takes a year or 6 months, because if interest rates are rising, obviously you don't want to still have a loan at 7% for 10 years.
Yeah, no, I meant that having the floating rate is similar to having an interest rate, even if the interest rate is fixed. So even if the DSR or the rate in the vault is fixed, this would be the equivalent. So you either take it variable and it's cheaper and it might fluctuate to 0.99 or 101, or you might fix it and pay more and someone will bear the risk for you.
Yeah. But in both cases, as those are real world assets, we are competing with real world banks. So the rates are coming from them and not from Compound or other platforms. So is that okay for this another discussion about the maturity and the fixed versus variable interest rate?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I mean, also, like, I guess it would be interesting here to have like a first. I mean, I think for now, right, like sort of doing this with like sub 50 million DAI worth of debt, like even raising the DSR on like the million DAI outstanding to quite a bit, you won't run into an immediate issue of having huge losses in the protocol. So I would say like this is a problem we'll have to solve, like going from like 50 to 500 million in DAI from real world assets. So like, but yeah, it would be super interesting to at that point and sort of leading up to that, right, get like maybe, I guess from the risk team mostly, or I don't know how governance will think of that in the future, but start a bit of a framework for managing liquidity, not just by adjusting interest rates sort of live every week, but having planning in like some part of the DAI being more stable and some part obviously being less stable, and then like seeing what makes sense. So I guess, yeah, that's really the question that will come up.
Yeah, that will be a discussion for next year, I think.
Yeah, I think if there's going to be different parts of the portfolio where some parts are more stable and other parts less stable, like, so, you know, there might be a fraction applied to the DSR. So maybe some will pay like 0.25 DSR and others pay like 2 DSR. but I think it's important that we use linear combinations rather than nonlinear, because once you start getting into nonlinear combinations of DSR, it becomes very complicated to hedge.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay, let's move to the legal structure. So it's not 100% for real-world assets. I think it's more broad, but it's still relevant for real-world asset, because if we had a legal entity, we could have this real-world entity to borrow DAI from maker, make the conversion in USD, and then lend the USD to real-world lender, borrower. But the issue is it possible to have a legal entity? So I started the thread, which has already some great feedbacks. Oh, I haven't seen the last one, but during the same meeting. Perfect. So if you have any input on that, please feel free to add your post. I will read them. And or if you disagree that the DAO shouldn't have any legal entity in the real world, that's a position as well. So we can either explore the solution when the real world asset will go bigger in size. Let's find other solutions. It's not an issue currently, because for both real world assets, either from the Centrifuge or Success, we have other ways. So for Success, we use the trust model, so we don't have the need for a legal entity. And for Centrifuge, we will be using some co-investors that will enforce, or at least guarantee that the contract is safe between the Centrifuge and the asset originator and the lenders. But even if it works at a small scale being still quite big, I think that in the future we will need something more strong to do that. So I don't know if someone has some input or question on those topics.
Hi, everyone. This is Priyanka from Open Law. I was just asked to join the call, and I guess this is probably best where I so I guess just to back up, I mean, like, I don't want to provide legal, just a caveat, I don't want to like provide legal advice or whether or not you should structure. I know that Open Law, we can definitely help you with the tooling to do that, and tie the smart contracts and some sort of like real world legal agreements. So whatever you end up, whatever endpoint, if you do decide to do a legal structure, we can help you tie them to the smart contracts. And I mean, I would just flag, which I just quickly skimmed. I would be wary if you guys decide not to do any sort of legal entity, just because it would be classified as like a general partnership, and that means people would be personally liable potentially. And I just don't know if you'd want to open yourself up to that risk. As a side there, and as far as just the sucking in real world assets via Maker, we have spoken to Centrifuge in the past about putting the SPV legal documentation on Open Law and kind of wrapping the smart contracts. I know you guys were talking about interest rates and the like. So like with Open Law, we can really take any third-party data feed or Oracle, and depending on whatever timing you want to trigger, you can actually feed that into the this living agreement effectively. And so I just wanted to add that we can kind of help out, at least provide the tools on that piece. We really just need the legal documents. And we talked to Centrifuge back early summer, so I'm happy. I actually followed up with them this morning, so I'm happy to pick those conversations up again. But I just wanted to share that, and I don't know if that would be interesting. Again, sorry if this is repetitive. I'm new here, so yeah.
No problem.
Okay. But that's basically the spiel here. So I don't know what on the legal structuring side what you guys are thinking, but we're happy to help.
So if I'm correct, you are saying that you can take the smart contracts and make them real world contract, right?
Yes. So let me just kind of, for those of you who don't know what open law is, give a brief background.
Yeah, sure.
So with open law, you can really take any real world legal contract and turn that into a dynamic data object. So you take the contract, use our domain specific markup language. That markup language then turns the agreement into a JSON object. In that object, you can actually embed a smart contract. You know, that could be, in this case, like a DAI transfer or something. Whatever the terms of the contract are can also be memorialized in the smart contract. The legal agreement and the markup language is tied to the smart contract itself. Both parties will then, you know, they can actually read the contract, so they can read the real natural language contract, agree to the terms, sign it. The signature gets memorialized on Ethereum or whatever blockchain. And then the smart contract gets called. So whatever the transfer is can happen based on the parameters that were set forth in the smart contract and the agreement itself. You know, our smart contracts actually live in a secure Scala environment off chain. Like that's how I like to think about it. It's like tethered on chain. So let's say both parties want to amend the agreement or the smart contract, stop it from running. You can actually sever the connection between the smart contract and blockchain itself. So that's kind of a high level of what we do. We have some other like bells and whistles when it comes to contract management and collecting data, but it's probably less relevant to the crowd here right now.
Yeah, but in this case, it's a contract with a MakerDAO as an entity.
Yes, so we could.
So that brings the issue that MakerDAO is maybe a general partnership.
Yeah. So I mean, you know, we can. Yes, that is separate from what I'm suggesting here. I guess I was speaking more in the context of the SPV itself. But as far as like the legal structuring, yeah, I mean, I didn't mean to take away from what you guys are thinking about structuring it legally, but yeah, if you have no legal structure, the default is general partnership.
Yeah, no, it's interesting that we can, yes, that you can provide the legal structure for smart contract. But if we go in this direction, that's half of the problem, but the other half is who will sign the contract on maker side. Currently, we avoid everything by not having any contract at all.
Mm-hmm.
So we can have the smart contract, let's say, but then we have to sign it, and we don't want to sign it, most likely, I think, as MakerDAO, because there could be legal implications.
Mm-hmm.
So do you provide some services as well to make limited liability subsidiaries, for instance?
We don't actually provide the legal services themselves, although, like, you know, it wouldn't be difficult for us to like put together an LLC. Like we have that, you know, that basic framework ready. But that's something that I'd have to think a little bit more about.
Okay, no problem. So is there someone in the audience that think having some legal entity and having contracts with our clients is a bad thing? Because some can say that a maker is a protocol and should be permissionless and trustless and everything.
I am of that opinion, and not talking about Centrifuge's interest, but just in general. I think Maker is not one legal entity operating in one legal jurisdiction. It is operating many different ones with possibly conflicting business practices, laws, and I think that like it's going to be very hard to try to tie it to one legal entity. And so like the trust, like the sort of the representative structure that we have, or the trust structure that Matt's working on, I think ultimately solve this in a much better way that doesn't try to turn Maker into a general partnership. But But yeah, so that's just my opinion here.
Yeah. But it still is. I mean, possibly you can, one asset originator can sue MakerDAO for, I guess, many reasons.
Yeah.
So that will be still an issue.
Is it though? Yeah, I guess it remains to be seen what the case law in the US around this is going to be for Americans. But I don't think we've seen token holders being considered as general partners in like sort of decentralized networks. But yeah, but I'm not a lawyer, and I'm definitely just speculating here. So don't. It's I guess not my expertise either. But
yeah, we will see what happened with the lawsuit against the foundation, because it's the best example we have. Because there was few because they were the major maker token holder and the originator of MakerDAO or maker of the protocol. But,
I mean, the original DAO was seen as a general partnership. I mean, obviously nothing ever really came of that, but yeah, there's some writings about that.
Yeah, I haven't found any legal precedent. There was obviously the DAO,
yeah,
but as it's screwed up quickly, never came out something.
Right.
They didn't have the time to have issues, I would say. So, and then I even found something else. So. But even the DAO made a LLC in Switzerland for all the contracts.
Yeah. I mean, for what it's worth, you know, at the Open Law side, we created the LAO, which is a limited liability autonomous organization. And I mean, that's more of an investment for investment purposes, but I feel like something like, and it's a Delaware-based entity, like something like that could be sort of repurposed. You know, I would have to dive in to see exactly, I'm not like a expert when it comes to like these SPVs and what structure is best well suited for that. So I don't want to speak out of turn, but I think something like that could also work here.
But maybe I can start with making a pool just to assess what the community want. If we should pursue something in this direction, I'll just say, as Lucas told us, that Maker is a protocol, so we shouldn't bother with having a legal entity in the real world. But I find that odd that we want to stay remote from the real world and still have loan in the for real world assets. For me, it's you can't have both. You can't be just the crypto world and still make loan in the real world. But yeah, I will try to redact some pool to get the opinion of the community. We have 5 minutes left, so if someone has a question or want to bring a topic on real world assets.
Yeah, maybe one thing to potentially cover that with Priyanka as well. It would be how does actually the flow of risk actually goes for existing actors should any actually class action actually happen, or any legal action actually happen in the case of the real world assets. Who would be actually kind of like the implicated parties? I think that would be also interesting to cover. I think Sebastian, you have kind of like briefly mentioned that on one of the posts, but I guess it's for the moment it's more like an assumption of how things would flow, right? So it probably would be good as well to clarify that, like who would be the legal entities actually implicated should anything actually happen.
Yeah, that's a real question. I'm not sure that because we will be dealing more in the real world, we will have more lawsuits. That's an assumption. I think so. But even without going in the real world, you can have lawsuit. So when the foundation will be out of the picture in the future, someone else will take the role. Maybe it will be long for wisdom, but we will need to clarify what will happen in this case. But I'm not sure we can have the solution as it's quite new to have DAO in. There is not a lot of legal history on those subjects, I think. But you are right, it's a concern.
Hey, so I'm a little confused here. So are we talking about a legal structure for the entire DAO, MakerDAO, or are we talking about a legal structure here of just the SPVs? And how does this correlate to like entities that are maybe based offshore? You know, if they're doing business outside the US, I mean, I don't understand how there needs to be a legal structure that correlates to US laws. So I'm a little confused. So, because if you ask the whole community, do you want a legal structure for the DAO, they're going to say no. I'm like 99.9% sure they're going to say no. The idea is to be decentralized, 99.99%. So I'm a little confused with what legal structure we're looking for.
Yeah, so there is many possibilities. One was to have a LAO and have a legal structure for MakerDAO. In general, I'm not sure that's very important, and that will not be possible probably, because it's decentralized and we want it that way. But my feeling was more on having a legal entity just to do the real world asset loans, for instance, with Matthew. So there is a contract between entities. It's signed, and there is no. And even if if there is an issue, it stays within this legal entity, and it doesn't go up to MakerDAO.
Got it. And what about what Matthew has proposed, setting up a trust?
Yeah, so we had a call with Matthew. So I'm still working on the details, but I think it's a nice solution. I'm just you still have to, yeah, Matthew. Maybe Matthew, you have more to comment if it can work at scale.
Yeah, I guess we need some legal advice, I guess. Yeah.
Because even for Matthew, we need some maker representative. So they most likely will be exposed.
Right, yeah.
And you have to trust, maker need to trust the maker representative. So is that okay with the community? One thing is true, it's not trustless. It's you need to trust those maker representatives. But you can have many, so it will be not that bad. But it's still an open question. That's why I want to explore other alternatives, so we can submit to the community all the alternatives, and the community can decide which one is the best. But yes, currently we have more questions than answers. Okay. So if there is there any more questions?
Yeah, I think it sounds just like a chat with someone like Priyanka or some some people that may have either themselves experience with that, or that actually can have access to resources that actually have experience with those kinds of questions. So I don't know, some examples like the guys that are doing, like, I don't know, tokenized properties and things like this, they might actually have already come through some of those same issues. I can try to chase up as well some people that I know that might be related to them, and then we could actually have a bit of a session on this, rather than us kind of just working out of a lack of jurisprudence on these things. and then moving forward from there.
Yeah, hi, this is Phil, and I'm sorry that I joined late. I agree with that statement, and there's a number of things that I can contribute and add to this discussion. Maybe not right at this moment, but happy to participate in any further discussions or meetings.
Great.
Seb, I don't know if it's possible, but I think it would be good to document, even if it's an overview of the different possibilities. Maybe it's already done. And then once we have that, we could get like a panel of experts. I don't know, I don't have a better name, where maybe Philippe, Priyanka, Matthew Rabinovich could join. I think we could also ask Amy if the legal / compliance team from the foundation might be able to throw a hand, even if it's not in a binding way, but maybe they know things. And again, we could have like a more productive call if we know the different possibilities, and we present them in a, hey guys, we've done our research, we're blocked here because we're not legal experts. So what's the thing to move things forward?
Yeah, but currently we are still exploring all the possibilities. So if some people have ideas that weren't explored, maybe it can be fine as well to just send me a message or make a blog post on the forum. So we can have every solution and try to explore them.
I keep saying that they can't. I know that they can't provide a binding legal advice, but we can say like, hey guys, has this been explored in the, like, is this something that you guys have seen? And they can say like, maybe you should try it or forget about it. I'm not saying that they should say like, yeah, this is good to go, we take responsibility. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and here's Martin with Centrifuge. Also be with our asset originators. Of course, you know, try to get as much of a legal opinion from our lawyers and
nice, yeah,
get that feedback back to you guys. And I think the plan for us really going forward is to not have the MakerDAO community entering into any agreement, but still make it for you, MKR holders, enforceable. And I think the risk of, and you mentioned it, Seth, of an asset originator suing you is comparably small, because hey, the value being represented by, you know, these tokenized NFTs in a Maker vault is not comparable to a crypto asset. That is exactly your concern as a community that you have as real world assets, because they are centered in the real world. They are basically centralized assets, not decentralized assets on the blockchain. So it's rather, I think the bigger question for you guys is, how can we actually make this investment of the MakerDAO community into those assets, make that enforceable? If, you know, there is defaults, how actually we can sue the SPV issuing the tokens being as a collateral in a Maker vault. How can we actually, you know, get access to those assets and force them to sell the invoices or to sell a property or whatever, and then get some money back?
Yeah, that's another solution, right? Correct.
Should we call it a day?
Yes, let's call it a day. Thank you very much for coming, and the video will be posted very soon on the forum somewhere.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.